Welcome history enthusiasts to our virtual chariot ride through the annals of ancient Rome. We will unravel the veils of myth and legend to explore the lives, intrigues, and cosmic echoes of the 7 mystical kings of Rome. These enigmatic rulers shaped the eternal city's destiny, leaving behind a legacy that still whispers through the cobblestone streets. Imagine a tale as old as Rome itself, where twin brothers, abandoned at birth, were brought up by a she-wolf and destined to become the founders of one of the world's most famous cities. This story, steeped in ancient lore and mythology, recounts the remarkable lives of Romulus and Remus. This is Rome Revisited. Join us as we explore the ancient Roman Empire, from Romulus to Constantine XI. These twin brothers were no ordinary children, born in the city of Alba Longa to their mother Rhea Silvia, a Vestal virgin. Their tale is one of epic proportions, echoing through the annals of history, as compelling today as it was in the days of yore. Their birth was not celebrated with joy, but marred by fear and trepidation. Their uncle, King Romulus, viewed their existence not as a blessing but a threat. He saw in them potential rivals for his throne, something he could not countenance. Thus, in a tragic turn of events, the brothers were cruelly abandoned, left to the mercy of the elements and the wild. But destiny had a different path in mind for these brothers. The river god Tiberinus, guardian of the waters, saw them and took them under his divine protection. He saved them from certain death, and in an act of benevolent intervention, delivered them safely to the care of a shepherd named Faustulus. Faustulus was a simple man, living a humble life tending to his flock. Despite his modest means, he had a heart full of kindness and compassion. When he found the twin infants, he did not hesitate to take them into his home and raise them as his own. He named them Romulus and Remus, and under his nurturing care, the brothers grew strong and brave. As grown individuals, the brothers ascended to positions of influence and aspired to reinstate their venerable patriarch, Numitor, to his rightful position of power. This determination, born out of a strong sense of justice and familial pride, was a defining aspect of their characters. As they grew older, they discovered their true heritage and decided to honor this by founding a new city. This city would go on to become one of the greatest in the world, known today as Rome. They were driven by the ambition to rectify the wrongs done to their family and restore dignity to their bloodline. However, a divergence in their visions soon arose. The point of contention? The location for the construction of their ambitious new city. Each brother had their own preferred site, both strategic in their own ways. This difference in choice was not just about geographical convenience, but also about symbolizing their individual beliefs and ideologies. Unable to reach a consensus, they decided to turn to a higher power for guidance. They proposed a contest of augury, the practice of interpreting the will of the gods through reading signs and omens. They believed this divine intervention would resolve their dispute and lead them to the correct path. It was a test of their faith as much as it was a test of their leadership. They disagreed about the hill upon which to build. Romulus preferred the Palatine Hill, while Remus preferred the Aventine Hill. They departed to their respective hills to await the word of the gods. Remus first saw 6 auspicious birds, but soon afterward Romulus saw 12. Romulus, the elder of the two, claimed to have won divine approval. However, this victory was not accepted graciously by his younger sibling, Remus. He was unable to swallow the bitter pill of defeat, which led to a surge of resentment within him. In a fit of rage, Remus insulted Romulus' new city and was killed, either by Romulus himself or by one of his supporters. With a path clear for Romulus, now without any opposition, he went on to establish the city of Rome and assumed the role of its first king. A tale of ambition, betrayal, and destiny, this legendary myth forms the bedrock of Rome's cultural identity. This epic story tells us about the birth of one of the greatest civilizations in history and the intricate dynamics of power, loyalty, and destiny that shaped it. However, like all ancient myths, the story of Romulus and Remus is not without its contradictions and variations. This legendary tale, passed down from generation to generation, varies in its accounts quite drastically based on the source of its narration. The tale, rich in its historical value, has seen numerous adaptations and interpretations over time, each providing a unique perspective and often leading to a thought-provoking inconsistency. The variation in the narrative starts from Livy, Dionysius of Halicarnassus, and stretches to Plutarch. Each of these ancient scholars had their own versions, their unique interpretations that somehow changed the course of this tale, adding to its enigmatic nature. In every account, there are noticeable deviations, some subtle and some profound, which make the story of Romulus and Remus even more intriguing. In Livy's account, the well-respected and celebrated Roman historian, the twins were conceived under rather peculiar circumstances. The mother, a Vestal virgin, was a priestess of Vesta, the goddess of the hearth. Her chastity was brutally violated by Mars, the god of war, leading to the birth of the twins. This version gives the story a divine touch, making the twins semi-divine beings, sons of a god. Then we move to Dionysius of Halicarnassus, a Greek historian known for his writings on Roman antiquities. His version takes a different turn, painting a different picture of the twins' parentage. He suggests that the twins were the offspring of Hercules, the divine hero renowned for his strength and adventures. This account, again, underlines a divine origin, but with a different father. Plutarch, another renowned Greek biographer and essayist, however, presents a more mortal version of the tale. He brings a human touch to the story, taking away the divine veil. In his account, the twins' father was not a god or hero but a mere mortal man named Romulus himself. This account adds a touch of reality to the otherwise mythical narrative. These differing accounts, each with their unique interpretations, all add layers of complexity to the tale of Romulus and Remus. They present a rich tapestry of interpretations, each adding its unique flavor to this timeless myth. They raise questions about the origins of the twins, their parentage, and the circumstances surrounding their birth. This discrepancy, this variation, is what makes this ancient myth so fascinating. They present a rich tapestry of interpretations, each adding its unique flavor to this timeless myth. Such is the nature of myths. They are not just ornate tales spun for entertainment but profound reflections of the cultures that were responsible for their origin. These myths are like a mirror reflecting the values, beliefs, and ethos of a society over the ages. Not surprisingly, all myths invariably undergo a fascinating process of metamorphosis, evolving and changing with each retelling based on the perception and understanding of the storyteller. This evolution in the retelling is what makes them a living part of the heritage, changing subtly, but importantly, with each generation that passes them on. The tale of Romulus and Remus, the legendary founders of Rome, is a perfect example of such an ever-evolving myth. The story of these twin brothers, who were abandoned and then raised by a she-wolf, is not a mere fanciful legend but a narrative that has been shaped and reshaped by countless generations. As the story goes, Romulus and Remus, after being nurtured by the she-wolf, grew up to build the city where Rome stands today. However, their story is far from being a simple myth. It delves deeper, touching on the complex themes of power, ambition, familial conflict, and moral ambiguity, all set against the backdrop of the founding of an empire. This makes the story of Romulus and Remus more than a mere tale of twin brothers. It is a narrative that speaks of the struggles and aspirations of a civilization on the threshold of greatness. Furthermore, this legend holds an enduring appeal because it encapsulates the human condition in all its complexity. It grapples with the universal themes of power and ambition, the bonds of brotherhood, and the consequences of rivalry and the hunger for supremacy. It portrays the bloom of a civilization, the rise, and the inevitable conflicts that accompany power and ambition. So, this tale, over time, has become much more than a myth. It has evolved to be an integral part of the cultural identity of Rome and the people associated with it. It doesn't just symbolize the birth of a civilization but represents the essence of what it means to be Roman. It speaks of a rich heritage that's embroiled with strength, courage, ambition, conflict, and resolution. In the end, the story of Romulus and Remus transcends the boundaries of mere myth and enters the realm of cultural identity. It symbolizes the birth of a civilization, the rise of a city, and the inevitable conflicts that come with power and ambition. As we step back and consider the varying accounts of Romulus and Remus, we're left with a thought-provoking question. How do these different interpretations of the same myth shape our understanding of Rome's founding story and its cultural identity? And perhaps more importantly, how does the myth of Romulus and Remus reflect our own stories, struggles, and aspirations? After restoring his grandfather Numitor to the throne of Alba Longa and disposing of his twin brother Remus for sole supremacy, it was time for Romulus to build a city of his own and establish his reign. From the beginning, there were several challenges that needed to be faced head-on. Challenges like, what would this new city look like? Who would he find to populate his new city? And how he would rule this new city that he would call Rome. Romulus proceeded to build his city on the Palatine Hill. He marked the boundaries of the city with a plough and declared that anyone who crossed the line would be killed. He also invited anyone who wanted to join his city to come and settle there, offering asylum to fugitives, exiles, and criminals. As a result, Rome soon became populated by a large number of men but very few women. Romulus realized that his city needed women to ensure its future, so he devised a plan to obtain them. He organized a festival in honor of Neptune, the god of the sea, and invited the neighboring tribes, especially the Sabines, to attend. The Sabines came with their families, and during the festivities, Romulus gave a signal to his men to seize the Sabine women and carry them away. The Sabine men were outraged and tried to rescue their daughters, sisters, and wives, but the Romans drove them away. The abduction of the Sabine women sparked a war between the Romans and the Sabines. The Sabine king, Titus Tatius, led his army to attack Rome and managed to enter the city through the Capitoline Hill after it was betrayed by a Roman named Tarquin. However, before the Sabines could reach the Palatine Hill, where Romulus and his men were defending, the Sabine women intervened. They ran between the two armies and pleaded with their fathers and brothers on one side and their husbands and sons on the other to stop fighting and make peace. They argued that they had already accepted their fate and become loyal wives and mothers to the Romans, and they did not want to see their families divided and destroyed by war. Their appeal moved both sides, and Romulus and Titus Tatius agreed to end the hostilities and form an alliance. They decided to rule Rome together as joint kings and to merge their people into one nation. The Romans and the Sabines shared the same laws, customs, and religion. The city then expanded to include both the Palatine and the Capitoline Hills. Romulus and Titus Tatius ruled Rome together for 5 years until Titus Tatius was killed by some of his former subjects who were angry that he had not avenged the death of some of their kinsmen who had been murdered by some Roman ambassadors. Romulus then became the sole king of Rome again and continued to expand his territory and power. He conquered many neighboring cities and tribes and incorporated them into his realm. He also established various institutions and traditions that shaped Roman culture and society. He divided the people into 3 tribes: the Ramnes, the Tities, and the Lusiers based on their origins. He also created the Senate, a council of 100 elders who advised him on important matters. He organized the army into units of 3,000 infantry and 300 cavalry called legions. He also instituted the census, a periodic registration of the citizens and their property, for the purposes of taxation and military service. He also founded the cult of Quirinus, a god of war and agriculture who was identified with Romulus himself. Romulus ruled Rome for 37 years according to the traditional chronology. He was a great leader and a warrior, but also a harsh and autocratic ruler. He did not tolerate any opposition or criticism. He was feared and respected by his subjects but not loved. He had many enemies both inside and outside his city who plotted against him and tried to overthrow him. However, he always managed to defeat them and maintain his authority. The end of Romulus's life is shrouded in mystery and legend. According to one version, he disappeared in a violent storm while he was reviewing his troops on the Campus Martius, a plain outside the city walls. A thick cloud covered him, and when it cleared he was gone. Some people believed that he was taken up to heaven by his father Mars and became a god. Others suspected that he was killed by the senators who were tired of his tyranny and wanted to get rid of him. They allegedly cut his body into pieces and hid them under their cloaks. Then they themselves spread the rumor that he had ascended to the sky. The people were divided, confused, and did not know what to believe. However, one of Romulus's loyal followers, a man named Proculus Julius, claimed that he had seen Romulus in a vision and that he had a message for the Romans. He said that Romulus had told him that he was indeed a god and that he wanted the Romans to worship him as Quirinus. He also said that Romulus had promised that Rome would become the greatest city in the world and that he would always protect and guide his people. Proculus's testimony convinced many Romans, and they accepted Romulus as a divine being. They built a temple for him on the Quirinal hill and honored him with sacrifices and festivals. They also regarded him as the founder and father of their city, as well as celebrating his birthday on the 21st of April, the date that he had founded Rome. Romulus was the first of the 7 kings of Rome who ruled the city from its foundation until the establishment of the Republic in the 6th century BC. His story is a mix of history and myth, and it reflects the origins and values of the Roman civilization. Romulus was a hero and a villain, a creator and a destroyer, a man and a god. He was the embodiment of the Roman spirit, which was ambitious, adventurous, courageous, and ruthless. He was the one who made Rome, and in turn, Rome and her people made him. Numa Pompilius, the legendary second king of Rome, succeeded Romulus after a 1-year interregnum. Who was he, and how did he transform Rome from a warlike city into a peaceful and religious one? What changes occurred during his reign, and what happened to him at the end of his life? According to Roman tradition, Numa Pompilius was born on the same day as the founding of Rome, April 21, 753 BC. He was of Sabine origin, a people who lived in the central Apennines and who had a close relationship with the Romans. His father was Pomponius, a noble and wealthy Sabine, while his mother was a daughter of the Sabine king Titus Tatius, who had ruled Rome jointly with Romulus for 5 years. Numa was the youngest of 4 sons, and he was educated by a wise man named Pythagoras, who taught him philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy. Numa was a pious and virtuous man who lived a simple and austere life while avoiding all luxury and violence. He and his wife Tatia, the only daughter of Titus Tatius, had a daughter named Pompilia. Pompilia later married Numa Marcius, who was the son of the first Pontifex Maximus, or chief priest, of Rome. After the death of Romulus in 716 BC, there was a period of confusion and anarchy in Rome. The Senate, which was composed of 100 elders from the 2 main tribes of Rome, the Romans and the Sabines, could not agree on who should be the next king. Some wanted a Roman, others a Sabine, and some even suggested a foreigner. They decided to consult the gods and to choose the king by augury, or the observation of the flight of birds. They sent 10 men, 1 from each of the 10 curii, or wards of the city, to the sacred grove of Quirinus, the god of war, and the deified Romulus, to perform the ritual. There they saw a marvelous sight. A large eagle, the symbol of Jupiter, the king of the gods, flew over the grove and then landed on a branch. The eagle then picked up a shield that belonged to one of the men and carried it away to the sky. The men interpreted this as a sign that the gods wanted them to choose a Sabine as the next king, since the shield belonged to a Sabine named Proculus Julius. They returned to the Senate and reported their vision. The Senate then asked Proculus Julius, who was a friend and relative of Numa, to propose a candidate. Proculus Julius suggested Numa Pompilius, who was widely respected for his wisdom and piety. The Senate agreed and sent an embassy to Numa, who was living in Cures, a Sabine town near Rome, to offer him the crown. At first, Numa refused the offer. He said that he was happy with his life in Cures and that he had no desire to rule a city that was founded by blood and violence. A city that was constantly at war with its neighbors. He said that Rome needed a warrior, not a philosopher, as its king. He also said that he was afraid of the wrath of the gods, who might punish him for taking the place of Romulus, their beloved son. He asked the embassy to leave him alone and to find another candidate. The embassy returned to Rome and told the Senate about Numa's rejection. The Senate was disappointed but not discouraged. They sent another embassy, this time composed of the most distinguished and influential men of Rome, including Proculus Julius, Numa Marcius, and Marcus, the son-in-law of Numa. They also brought with them gifts, honors, and letters from his father, his kinsmen, and his teacher Pythagoras, who all urged him to accept the kingship. They told Numa that he was the only one who could bring peace and order to Rome and that he had a duty to serve the gods and the people. They also told him that he had nothing to fear from the gods, who had clearly shown their favor to him by the sign of the eagle and the shield. They appealed to his patriotism, his piety, and his wisdom and begged him to change his mind. Numa was moved by their words and by the wishes of his family and friends. He agreed to become the king of Rome on the condition that the people would ratify his election. The embassy rejoiced and escorted Numa to Rome, where he was welcomed by the Senate as well the people, who confirmed him as their king by a unanimous vote. Numa then began his reign, which lasted for 43 years, from 715 to 672 BC. He was a very different king from Romulus, who had been a warrior and a conqueror. Numa was a peacemaker and a lawgiver who devoted his attention to the internal affairs of Rome and the cultivation of the arts of peace. He reformed the calendar, which had been based on the lunar cycle and had only 10 months, which started in March and ended in December. He added 2 more months, January and February, and adjusted the length of the months to match the solar cycle, making the year 355 days long. He also divided the year into 2 seasons, summer and winter, and assigned different festivals and ceremonies to each month according to agricultural and religious activities. He also established the leap year, which added an extra month every 2 years to correct the discrepancy between the lunar and the solar cycles. Numa also founded many of Rome's religious institutions and introduced new gods and rites to the Roman pantheon. He built the Temple of Janus, the god of beginnings and endings, of gates and doors, and of war and peace, on the Forum, the main square of the city. The temple had 2 doors, one facing east and one facing west, and a statue of Janus with 2 faces, one looking to the past and one to the future. Numa decreed that the doors of the temple should be open in times of war and closed in times of peace to indicate the state of the city. During his reign, the doors were always closed, as Numa maintained peace with all his neighbors and always avoided war. Numa Pompilius died in 673 BC at the age of 80 and was buried on the Janiculum hill near the Temple of Janus. He was mourned by the whole city, and he was remembered as a great king who had made Rome into a prosperous and civilized city. He was also revered as a saint and a hero, and some even considered him to be a god. He was the second of the 7 kings of Rome who ruled the city from its foundation until the establishment of the Republic in the 6th century BC. His story is a mix of history and myth, and it reflects the origins and the values of the Roman civilization. Numa was a peacemaker and a lawgiver, a philosopher and a priest, a man and a god. The life of Tullus Hostilius, the 3rd king of Rome, was a tapestry woven with both glory and tragedy. His story begins in the heart of ancient Rome, where a young Tullus was born into a world of honor and duty that would one day shape the destiny of a burgeoning empire. Tullus Hostilius ruled from 672 to 641 BC. He was known for his warlike character and his expansion of Roman territory. He defeated Fidenae and Veii, as well as destroyed the former mother city. He also established the College of the Fetials, whose priests were in charge of treaties and declarations of war. Tullus' rise to power was marked by his prowess on the battlefield, earning him the respect of both soldiers and citizens alike. With each victory, he solidified his place as a fearless leader. According to ancient sources, Tullus Hostilius was the grandson of Hostus Hostilius, who had fought with Romulus and died during the Sabine invasion of Rome. Tullus would go on to contend with Numa Marcius, the son of Numa Pompilius, for the throne, where he would go on to win with the support of the people. Tullus' reign, however, was not without challenges, considering he was the total opposite of his predecessor, the peaceful and pious Numa. Tullus was instead aggressive and ambitious as he sought to restore the military glory of Rome. One notable event of his reign was the war with Fidenae and Veii, two neighboring cities that were hostile to Rome. Tullus defeated them with the help of Metius Fuficius, the dictator of Alba Longa, who was supposed to be his ally. However, Metius proved to be treacherous and tried to play both sides. Tullus punished him by tearing him apart with chariots. This episode was seen in Roman eyes as a demonstration of justice, discipline, and authority. The fierce conflict that came with the neighboring city-state of Alba Longa would test his mettle and strategic acumen, ultimately leading to a series of events that would change the course of Roman history. One of the most famous episodes of these conflicts was the Battle of the Horatii and the Curiati, a duel between two sets of triplets, one from Rome and one from Alba Longa, to decide the outcome of the war between the two cities. The Horatii were the Roman brothers, while the Curiati were the Alban brothers. The duel ended with the Roman victory of the sole surviving Horatius brother, who then in turn killed his own sister for mourning the death of her Curiatian lover. This was celebrated as an example of Roman patriotism, courage, and loyalty. One of the last acts of his reign was the final destruction of Alba Longa, the mother city of Rome, along with the transfer of all its population and institutions to Roman control. He then enrolled the Alban nobles in the Roman Senate and incorporated the Alban people into the Roman state. This marked the end of the First Latin League and the beginning of the Roman hegemony. It goes without saying that this greatly increased the size and power of Rome. In the end, the warrior king would meet his fate, leaving a legacy that would be debated and dissected by historians for centuries to come. The death of Tullus Hostilius was mysterious and tragic. According to some sources, he was struck by lightning after he neglected the worship of the gods and tried to imitate the piety of Numa Pompilius. It is said that he was killed by Jupiter himself, who was most angry with his impiety. According to other sources, he died of a plague that afflicted Rome at that time. Despite the trials, Tullus was a visionary. His 31-year reign saw the expansion of Roman territory, defeating many of the enemies of Rome, and the destruction of Alba Longa. He also established the College of the Fetials and built the Curia Hostilia, the first Senate house and a grand spectacle that showcased the might of Rome and brought the people together in celebration. He was a man whose life encapsulated the essence of a civilization on the rise. Yet, as with many tales of power and glory, tragedy struck. Tullus Hostilius faced much internal strife, and the weight of his decisions bore heavily on his conscience. His legacy became a complex mosaic of triumphs and regrets. Of all the 7 kings, his time as the 3rd king of Rome was one of the most warlike and ambitious. He left a legacy of military glory but also of violence and impiety. He was succeeded by Ancus Marcius, the grandson of Numa Pompilius, who restored the religious and civil laws of his grandfather. As we gaze upon the ruins that echo with the whispers of the past, let us remember Tullus Hostilius, a leader who faced the challenges of his time with courage and determination, leaving an indelible mark on the eternal city of Rome. Ancus Marcius, born into the lineage of Rome's founders, brought with him a sense of duty and a commitment to the values that defined the Roman spirit. His journey began as a torchbearer of a legacy that was already beginning to shape the destiny of an emerging empire. In the Chronicles of Rome, the 4th king unfolds a chapter whose reign would be marked by the foundations he laid for the glory of the eternal city. Ancus Marcius was respected and admired by the Romans for his balance of war and peace, as well as his respect for the traditions of his ancestors. Ancus Marcius ruled from 642 to 617 BC. He was the grandson of Numa Pompilius, the second king of Rome and the son of Numa Marcius and Pompilia. He inherited the peaceful and pious character of his grandfather, but he also proved to be a capable military leader and a wise statesman. Unlike his predecessors, Ancus was not only a warrior but also a diplomat. His approach to foreign affairs expanded Rome's influence through alliances and strategic endeavors, leading the city to new heights. Ancus's commitment to peace did not make him immune to conflict. His leadership was tested in several conflicts where he displayed both military prowess and strategic acumen to safeguard the interests of Rome. Ancus Marcius faced many challenges and conflicts during his reign, such as the rebellion of the Latins who tried to regain their independence after the destruction of Alba Longa by his predecessor Tullus Hostilius. He also had to deal with the raids of the Sabines and the Etruscans who threatened the Roman borders. He managed to defeat his enemies and secure the Roman dominion over the surrounding lands, as well as expand the Roman territory by conquering several Latin towns, such as Politorium, Tethlonai, Ficana, and Medulla. Ancus Marcius was not merely a ruler, he was a builder. He initiated many ambitious construction projects that transformed Rome. He founded the port of Ostia at the mouth of the Tiber River, which became an important commercial and naval center for Rome and showcased his vision for a thriving and connected city. He built the first prison in Rome, the Mamertine prison. He was the creator of the Fetial Law, which regulated the relations between Rome and other states. Not to mention he dug a trench around the city, the Fossa Quiritium. Ancus was also considered the founder of the plebeian class, as he granted citizenship and land to many of the conquered Latins. He also increased the number of senators by adding 100 new members from the most distinguished families of the Albans and the Latins. Ancus improved the religious and legal institutions of Rome by copying the sacred books of Numa and displaying them to the public. He also created the office of the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome. Ancus, recognizing the importance of tradition, sought to strengthen the fabric of Roman society. He was able to codify laws and establish customs that would endure for generations. As the sun set on Ancus Marcius's reign, the legacy he left behind extended far beyond his time. The city of Rome, under his guidance, flourished not only in strength but also in cultural and civic achievements. He died of a sudden illness and was succeeded by Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, the first Etruscan king of Rome. Ancus Marcius left a lasting legacy for Roman history and culture. He was the last king of the Numa dynasty and the last native Roman king. The life of Ancus Marcius invites us to reflect on the delicate balance between war and peace, tradition and progress. His reign serves as a testament to the enduring spirit of Rome, a spirit that continues to shape the course of history. As the waters of the Tiber flow beneath the bridges built by Ancus Marcius, we are reminded that the foundations he laid endure and are a testament to the ongoing legacy of the builder king of Rome. In the annals of Roman history, the name Lucius Tarquinius Priscus shines as a beacon of innovation and strategic vision. Tarquinius Priscus, or Tarquin the Elder, was the fifth king of Rome and the first of its Etruscan dynasty. His military campaigns expanded Rome's influence, solidifying its position in the Italian peninsula. A strategic genius, he recognized the importance of alliances, forging key partnerships that would become the backbone of Rome's power. Tarquinius reigned from 616 to 578 BC. He was born in the Etruscan city of Tarquini, where his father Demaratus was a wealthy merchant from Corinth. After inheriting his father's entire fortune, Lucius attempted to gain a political office. However, he was prohibited from obtaining political office in Tarquini because of the ethnicity of his father. He then moved to Rome with his wife Tanachil, a skilled prophetess. According to legend, on the way to Rome an eagle took his cap and placed it back on his head, which Tanachil interpreted as a sign of his future greatness. His charisma and intelligence soon captured the attention of Ancus Marcius, the reigning king in Rome, who appointed him as the guardian of his sons. When Ancus died, Tarquin managed to win the election for the kingship despite the opposition of the sons of Ancus. He claimed that he was the rightful heir since he was also a descendant of Numa Pompilius, the second king of Rome. Of his 2 daughters, one married Servius Tullius, the future 6th king of Rome. The other married Marcus Brutus and thus became the mother of Lucius Junius Brutus, the founder of the Republic. As king, Tarquin expanded Roman power and territory through military conquests and grand architectural projects. He waged war against the Latins, the Sabines, and the Etruscans and annexed several towns to Rome. According to Livy, Tarquin increased the number of the Senate members to 300 by adding 100 men from the leading minor families. Included in these was the family of the Octavii, from whom the first Roman Emperor Augustus was descended. He intended that those newly added to the Senate would be grateful for their position and thus loyal to him, strengthening his rule as king. Priscus introduced political reforms that laid the groundwork for the Roman Republic. His keen understanding of governance led to the division of Rome into administrative districts, foreshadowing the later Roman Republic structure. Priscus' reign was also marked by a divine encounter. The acquisition of the Sibylline books, prophetic writings foretelling Rome's destiny, added a spiritual dimension to his rule. He invested in many religious institutions, further strengthening the cultural and moral fabric of Rome. Tarquin is said to have built the Circus Maximus, the first and largest stadium in Rome for chariot racing. The Circus Maximus started out as an underwhelming piece of land but was built into a grand and beautiful stadium. Raised seating was erected privately by the senators and equites, and other areas were marked out for private citizens. There the king established a series of annual games. According to Livy, the first horses and boxers to participate were brought from Etruria. It received the name Circus Maximus as a way to set it apart from the other stadiums similarly built at this time. After a great flood, Tarquin drained the damp lowlands of Rome and constructed the Cloaca Maxima, Rome's great sewer. The arch was constructed in 578 BC and took inspiration from Etruscan structures of the earlier period. He also constructed a stone wall around the city and began the construction of a temple in honor of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill. The latter is said to have been funded in part by the plunder seized from the Sabines. Tarquin's first war was waged against the Latins. Tarquinius took the Latin town of Appioli by storm and took great plunder from there back to Rome. According to the Fasti Triumphales, this war must have occurred prior to 588 BC. The Latins claimed that peace treaties developed by Romulus and the other Roman kings no longer applied and as such launched the first set of attacks. Seeing the opportunity to incorporate the Latins into Rome's ranks, Tarquin quickly responded by conquering multiple Latin cities. As a result, the Latins requested help from the Sabines and Etruscans. Choosing not to split up his military power, Tarquin chose to keep the attack on the Latins, leading to a Roman victory. Subsequently, the Latin cities of Corniculum, Old Ficulia, Cameria, Crustumerium, Emeriola, Medulla, and Nomentum were subdued and became Roman. After conquering the Latins, Tarquin began his assault on the Sabines. Having their base camped at the corner of 2 rivers, the Sabines were able to move their troops quickly and efficiently. Using his military cunning, Tarquin chose to launch a surprise attack on the base at night. He did this by setting a fleet of small boats aflame and then sending them down the river to set the Sabine camp on fire. While the Sabines were focused on dousing the flames, Tarquin and his troops moved in to dismantle the camp. Later, his military ability was again tested by an attack from the Sabines. Tarquin doubled the number of equites to help the war effort. The Sabines were defeated after difficult street fighting in the city of Rome. In the peace negotiations that followed, Tarquin received the town of Calatia, and appointed his nephew, Arruns Tarquinius, better known as Agarius, as commander of the garrison there. Tarquin returned to Rome and celebrated a triumph on September 13, 585 BC. Tarquin also wished to seek peace with the Etruscans, but they refused. Since Tarquin had kept the captured Etruscan auxiliaries prisoners for meddling in the war with the Sabines, the 5 Etruscan cities who had taken part declared war on Rome. 7 other Etruscan cities joined forces with them. The Etruscans soon captured the Roman colony at Fidenae, which thereupon became the focal point of the war. After several bloody battles, Tarquin was once again victorious, and he subjugated the Etruscan cities that had taken part in the war. At the successful conclusion of each of his wars, Rome was enriched by Tarquin's plunder. Tarquinius was the first Roman ruler to ever celebrate a Roman triumph. According to Florus, Tarquin celebrated his triumphs in the Etruscan fashion, riding a golden chariot drawn by 4 horses, while wearing a gold-embroidered toga and the tunica palmata, a tunic upon which palm leaves were embroidered. He also introduced other Etruscan insignia of civilian authority and military distinction. These include the scepter of the king and the trabea, a purple garment that varied in form, but was perhaps most often used as a mantle, the fasces carried by the lictors, the curule chair, the toga praetexta, later worn by various magistrates and officials, the rings worn by senators, the pallidamentum, a cloak associated with military command, and the phalera, a disc of metal worn on a soldier's breastplate during parades or displayed on the standards of various military units. Strabo reports that Tarquin introduced Etruscan sacrificial and divinatory rites, as well as the tuba, a straight horn used chiefly for military purposes. As a result, most classical Roman symbols for war harken back to his time as king. Tarquin is said to have reigned for 38 years. According to legend, the sons of his predecessor, Ancus Marcius, believed that the throne was stolen from them and thus made plans to get it back. They arranged the king's assassination by having 2 men disguised as farmers present a disagreement between themselves to the king for judgment. Their back-and-forth bickering would create enough of a ruckus that a riot would ensue. Then at the right moment, one of the men would plant an axe into Tarquin's head, which proved to be a fatal blow. However, Queen Tanakil addressed the crowd that gathered outside the now-deceased king's chambers and gave out that the king was merely wounded. She took advantage of the confusion to establish Servius Tullius as regent. When the death of Tarquin was confirmed some time later, Tullius had ruled long enough and ably enough as regent that he was easily confirmed to become king in place of Marcius's sons or those of Tarquin. Servius Tullius became the 6th king of Rome and the 2nd of the Etruscan dynasty. Tarquin was the first king of Rome to have the surname Priscus, which means the elder. He was also the first king to wear a purple robe and a golden crown, symbols of royalty. He was a great warrior, a visionary leader, and a skilled builder. He left a lasting legacy for the history and culture of Rome. Tarquinius Priscus' legacy was not without shadows. His ambitious pursuits and foreign alliances stirred discontent among many in the Roman aristocracy, leading to his tragic end. His life, a tapestry of triumphs and tribulations, left an indelible mark on Rome's line of succession and thus its trajectory. As the sun sets over the majestic Roman Forum, we reflect on the life of Tarquinius Priscus, a king who dared to dream beyond the limits of his time, leaving behind a city transformed and a legacy that echoes through the corridors of history. Servius Tullius ascended to the throne at a time when the city was at the cusp of profound change. His rise to power from the lowest level of society was uncommon for the times in which he lived. His reign was filled with a remarkable tapestry of social reforms, military prowess, and political acumen. Many historians refer to him as the last good Roman king. Many throughout history refer to him as the chosen one. Servius Tullius was the legendary 6th king of Rome and the 2nd of its Etruscan dynasty. He reigned from 578 to 535 BC. According to ancient sources, he was a slave in the household of Tarquinius Priscus, the 5th king of Rome, and his wife Tanakil. Tullius was brought to the palace as a child with his mother, Ocresia. As legend tells it, Tanakil discovered his potential for greatness by means of witnessing various omens surrounding Servius and therefore preferred him to even her own sons. He rose to power with the help of Tanakil, who recognized his divine origin and prophetic abilities. He married the daughter of Tarquinius, thus providing a vital link between the families, and became his successor after his assassination. His ascension to the throne was covered in tragedy and misdirection. When King Tarquinius Priscus was mortally wounded in an assassination attempt by the sons of his predecessor, King Ancus Marcius, Tarquinius's wife, Tanakil concealed his death from the public and placed Servius as regent. After enough time had passed and Servius had proven himself as a capable ruler, Tarquinius's death was finally announced and Servius Tullius was easily elected as the new king. After their failed attempt to regain power and being exposed as the killers of the late king, the sons of Ancus Marcius went into exile and were never heard from in Rome again. Servius Tullius proved his mettle on the battlefield, expanding the territorial boundaries of Rome through a series of strategic military campaigns. He enlarged the territory of Rome by conquering several Latin towns, such as Corniculum, Crustumerium, Nomentum, and Medulla. His victories over neighboring city-states solidified Rome's dominance in central Italy, earning him the respect of both the common people and the aristocracy. Servius Tullius' most enduring legacy may lay in his social reforms. Recognizing the need for a more equitable distribution of power and resources, he introduced the Servian Constitution, a groundbreaking set of laws that redefined the social structure of Rome. Central to these reforms was the implementation of a new census, a systematic enumeration of citizens that formed the basis for taxation and military service. This innovation ensured that the burdens of governance and defense were shared proportionally among the citizens. He divided the citizens into 5 classes based on their wealth and military service and created the Centuriate Assembly, which gave more representation to the common people. Servius Tullius also invested in the development of Rome's infrastructure. He expanded the Pomerium, the sacred boundary of the city, and built a wall around it known as the Servian Wall. The Servian Wall would encircle Rome, fortifying the city against external threats. His efforts transformed Rome into a fortified and well-organized metropolis. Servius' reforms challenged the entrenched aristocracy, creating political tension. These lead to questions of his lineage and legitimacy to rule. The main aristocrat to question his rule was Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, the king's son-in-law and son of the late king Tarquinius Priscus. Lucius claimed Servius illegitimate for the reasons of being a slave born of a slave, for failing to be elected by the Senate and the people during an interregnum, as had been the tradition for the election of kings of Rome, for being gifted the throne by a woman, for favoring the lower classes of Rome over the wealthy, for taking the land of the upper classes for distribution to the poor, and for instituting his census, which exposed the wealthy upper classes to popular envy. The tragic turn of events came when his daughter Tullia conspired with Lucius to overthrow her father. In a shocking act, he was murdered in his palace by Tarquin's henchmen. Then his body was dragged into the street where Tullia drove her chariot over her father's lifeless body, symbolizing a brutal end to his era of reforms. He was buried in a tomb on the Esquiline Hill where a column of smoke was said to rise from his grave. Lucius would then immediately succeed Servius to become Rome's 7th and final king. Servius Tullius' legacy endured beyond his tragic demise. The Servian Constitution became a foundational document for Roman governance, influencing subsequent political structures. His contributions to the Roman military, social organization, and urban planning laid the groundwork for the republic that would follow. By entrusting the military defense of the state to all citizens, the Servian reforms created interdependency among the varying social classes. In its organization of voting tribes, it inextricably allied political and military life and opened up a political space for republican participation. In the eyes of Livy, the military service rendered by plebeians was thus a form of public service on par with patrician duty in the Senate. Servius Tullius was the last king of Rome to be elected by the Senate and later the people. He was a popular and benevolent ruler, who improved the lot and fortune of the lower classes of Rome. He was also a great warrior, a visionary leader, and a skilled builder. Servius Tullius emerged from humble beginnings to reach the top of a growing empire. His life, marked by military triumphs, social reforms, and a tragic end, remains a compelling legend in the rich story of Roman history, thus showcasing the complexities of power, progress, jealousy, greed, and ambition in the ancient world. Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, also known as Tarquin the Proud, from his cognomen Superbus, Latin for proud, arrogant, or lofty, was the seventh and last king of Rome. His reign is marked by political and social unrest. Tarquin ascended to the throne around 535 BCE and ruled until 509 BCE, reigning for 25 years until the popular uprising when he was overthrown. His reign is characterized by tyranny, lavish building projects, and military endeavors. The assault of Lucretia, a noblewoman, played a pivotal role in his downfall, leading to his exile and the establishment of the Roman Republic. Lucius Tarquin belonged to the Etruscan Tarquini clan. He is traditionally considered the son of Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, the fifth king of Rome. Although the exact chronology is unclear, Lucius Tarquin and his brother Arruns would marry the daughters of Servius Tullius, Rome's sixth king, who were known in history as Tullius Major and Tullius Minor respectively. In addition, one of Lucius' sisters would marry Marcus Junius Brutus and became the mother of Lucius Tarquin Junius Brutus, who would later become one of the founding members of the Roman Republic. We will discuss Brutus in more detail in a later video. Tullia Major was of mild disposition, yet her younger sister was of fiercer temperament and ambition, more suited to Lucius Tarquin and not that of her husband Arruns, who seemed to be more mild-mannered and content. Both out of her lust for and her loathing of her husband and older sister, Tullia would convince Lucius Tarquin to dispose of their spouses. Once their spouses were dead and out of the way, the conspirators were married. They had 3 sons, Titus, Arruns, and Sextus, and a daughter, Tarquinia, who married Octavius Mamilius, the Prince of Tusculum. Before long they began plotting to usurp the king, Servius Tullius, Tullia's own father, and seize the throne. They begin bribing senators and other men of importance. They spread propaganda denouncing Servius and his reforms, which had become popular with the people. Then, when Lucius Tarquin felt the time was right, he went to the Senate house with a group of armed men, sat on the throne, and summoned the senators to attend to him. He gave a speech to the senators denigrating Servius for many alleged crimes, which we addressed in our video on King Servius Tullius. When Servius heard about what was happening, he raced over to the Senate house with as many armed men as he could find and confronted Lucius Tarquin. Lucius Tarquin then leveled the same accusations, this time directly to the king, and had Servius removed and thrown into the street. According to legend, it was at this time that Tullia raced the street in her chariot and trampled her father to death. By some accounts, she rode over his still body multiple times. The street where Tullia disgraced the dead king afterward became known as the Vicus Celeratus, the street of crime. Lucius Tarquin began his reign by ridding himself of Servian loyalists. This meant the deaths of several influential senators and other high-ranking members of the government. He made such decisions unilaterally, which began to cause fear and concern among the remaining senators and any others who began to question his rule. From early on, the signs of tyranny were present for all to see, although Lucius Tarquin would at times use conning to appear just. One such time was early in his reign when Lucius Tarquin called a meeting of the Latin leaders to discuss the bonds between Rome and the Latin towns. The meeting was held at a grove sacred to the goddess Ferentina. At the meeting, Turnus Herdonius inveighed against Lucius Tarquin's arrogance and warned his countrymen against trusting the Roman king. Lucius Tarquin then bribed Turnus's servant to store a large number of swords in his master's lodging. Lucius Tarquin called together the Latin leaders and accused Turnus of plotting his assassination. The Latin leaders accompanied Lucius Tarquin to Turnus's lodging, and thus, the swords then being discovered, the Latin's guilt was then speedily inferred. Turnus was condemned to be thrown into a pool of water in the grove with a wooden frame, or kratos, placed over his head, into which stones were thrown, drowning him. The meeting of the Latin chiefs then continued, and Lucius Tarquin persuaded them to renew their treaty with Rome, becoming her allies rather than her enemies. It was agreed that the soldiers of the Latins would attend at the grove on an appointed day, and form a united military force with the Roman army. Next, Tarquin instigated a war against the Volsci, taking the wealthy town of Susa Pomatia. He celebrated a triumph, and with the spoils of this conquest, he commenced the erection of the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus. He then engaged in a war with Gabii, one of the Latin cities that had rejected the treaty with Rome. Unable to take the city by force of arms, Tarquin resorted to another stratagem. His son Sextus, pretending to be ill-treated by his father, and covered with the bloody marks of stripes, fled to Gabii. The infatuated inhabitants entrusted him with the command of their troops. When he had obtained the unlimited confidence of the citizens, he sent a messenger to his father to inquire how he should deliver the city into his hands. The king, who was walking in his garden when the messenger arrived, made no reply but kept striking off the heads of the tallest poppies with his stick. Sextus took the hint, and put to death, or banished on false charges, all the leading men of Gabii, after which he had no difficulty in compelling the city to submit. Lucius Tarquin agreed upon peace with the Equi and renewed the treaty of peace between Rome and the Etruscans. According to the Fasti Triumphales, he won a victory over the Sabines and established Roman colonies in the towns of Signia and Circuitu. In Rome, Tarquin leveled the top of the Tarpeian rock, overlooking the Forum, and removed a number of ancient Sabine shrines to make way for the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill, a project initiated by his predecessor, Tarquinius Priscus. He constructed tiers of seats in the Circus Maximus and ordered the excavation of Rome's great sewer, the Cloaca Maxima. According to one story, Lucius Tarquin was approached by the Cummian Sibyl, who offered him 9 books of prophecy at an exorbitant price. When he abruptly refused, the Sibyl proceeded to burn 3 of the 9. She then offered him the remaining books but at the same price. He hesitated but refused again. The Sibyl then burned 3 more books before offering him the 3 remaining books at the original price. At last, he accepted, thus finally obtaining the Sibylline books. In 509 BC, Lucius Tarquin began to feel the tide of the Roman populace turning against me. Tarquin decided he would embark on a campaign against the very wealthy nation of Rutul in hopes of attaining great spoils and assuaging the ire of his subjects. Failing to take their capital city of Ardea by storm, the king decided to take the city by siege instead. With little prospect of battle, the young noblemen in the king's army fell to drinking and boasting. When the subject turned to the virtue of their wives, Lucius Tarquinius Calatinus claimed to have the most dedicated of spouses. With his companions, they secretly visited each other's homes and discovered all of the wives enjoying themselves, except for Lucretia, the wife of Calatinus, who was engaged in domestic activities. Lucretia received the princes graciously. All the while her beauty and virtue kindled the flame of desire in Calatinus's cousin, Sextus Tarquinius, the king's son. After a few days, Sextus returned to Calatia, where he implored Lucretia to give herself to him. When she refused, he threatened that if she did not yield herself to him, he would kill her, and claimed that he had discovered her in the act of adultery with a slave, for which reason he had slain the unfaithful Lucretia, delivering the punishment as her husband's kinsman. To spare her husband the shame threatened by Sextus, Lucretia submitted to his desire. But when he had departed for the camp, Lucretia sent for her husband and father, revealing the whole matter, and accusing Sextus of assaulting her. Despite the pleas of her family, Lucretia's shame compelled her to stab herself to spare Calatinus from any suspicion that she had betrayed him. Her grieving husband, together with his father-in-law, Spurius Lucretius Tricipitinus, as well as his companions, Lucius Junius Brutus and Publius Valerius, swore an oath to expel the king and his family from Rome. Together they were able to rally the masses by recounting the various grievances of the people, the king's abuses of power, and by inflaming public sentiment over the assault of Lucretia. They were also able to revoke the king's imperium and send him into exile. Tullia fled the city in fear of the mob, while Sextus Tarquinius, his deed revealed, fled to Gabii where he hoped for the protection of the Roman garrison. However, his previous conduct there had made him many enemies and he was soon assassinated. In place of the king, the Roman Senate resolved to elect 2 consuls to hold power jointly. They would, as the first 2 consuls, Brutus and Collatinus, form what would be the new Roman Republic. When word of the uprising reached the king, Tarquin abandoned Ardea and sought support from his allies in Etruria. The cities of Veii and Tarquini sent contingents to join the king's army, and he prepared to march upon Rome. Meanwhile, Brutus prepared a force to meet the returning army. In a surprising reversal, Brutus demanded that his colleague Collatinus resign the consulship and go into exile because he bore the hated name of Tarquinius. Stunned by this betrayal, Collatinus complied, and his father-in-law was chosen to succeed him. Meanwhile, the king sent ambassadors to the Senate, ostensibly to request the return of his personal property, but in reality to subvert several of Rome's leading men. When this plot was discovered, those found guilty were put to death by the consuls. Brutus was forced to condemn his 2 sons Titus and Tiberius to death because they had taken part in the conspiracy. Leaving Lucretius in charge of the city, Brutus departed to meet the king on the field of battle. At the Battle of Silva Arsia, the Romans won a hard-fought victory over the king and his Etruscan allies, with each side sustaining painful losses. After this failure, Tarquin turned to Lars Porsena, the king of Clusium. Porsena's march on Rome and the valiant defense of the Romans achieved legendary status, giving rise to the story of Horatius at the bridge, and the bravery of Gaius Mucius Scaevola. Accounts vary as to whether Porsena finally entered Rome, or was thwarted, but modern scholarship suggests that he was able to occupy the city briefly before withdrawing. Ultimately, his efforts were of no avail to the exiled Roman king. Tarquin's final attempt to regain the Roman kingdom came in 499 or 496 BC, when he persuaded his son-in-law, Octavius Mamilius, dictator of Tusculum, to march on Rome at the head of a Latin army. The Roman army was led by the dictator Albus Postumius Albus and his master of the horse, Titus Aebutius Elva, while the elderly king and his last remaining son, Titus Tarquinius, accompanied by a force of Roman exiles, fought alongside the Latins. Once more the battle was hard fought and narrowly decided, with both sides suffering great losses. Mamilius was slain, the master of the horse grievously injured, and Titus Tarquinius barely escaped with his life. But in the end, the Latins abandoned the field, and Rome retained her independence. After the Latin defeat and the death of his son-in-law, Tarquin went to the court of Aristodemus at Cumae, where he died in 495. Lucius Tarquin's reign would be remembered as the catalyst for establishing the Roman Republic. His tyranny and self-servicing rule caused Romans to despise all things monarchy to the point of their hatred of being ruled by kings became state policy. This philosophy would dominate Roman politics for the next 500 years, climaxing with the assassination of the most famous Roman of them all. Lucius Tarquin was a strong and capable ruler, but his reign shows a pattern throughout human history that ruling only for oneself ultimately leads to one's self-destruction. As we close the book on these mystical kings, we are left asking ourselves one question: how true and accurate are these stories? Unfortunately, we lost many of the sources to early Roman history during the first sack of Rome by the Gauls in 390 BCE. However, it is safe to say that only 7 kings ruling over a span of 244 years is highly unlikely. It would mean that each king ruled consecutively for around 35 years each, which is not recorded anywhere else in human history. The law of the 7 mystical kings of Rome is given to explain the earliest Roman people along with their foundations and customs, to show that the Roman spirit is based in divinity, and thus, a proper justification to conquer and rule. Their legacy lives on. So could your knowledge about such fascinating pieces of history? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more captivating content about ancient Rome. Dive into the past and keep the spirit of antiquity alive. This is Rome Revisited.